So I'm down and so I'm out, but so are many others.
My name is Stephen Sindoni, and you're about to hear an excerpt from Sindoni Says. My earliest memories of my childhood was spent in a house at 220 Hopkins Street in Brooklyn, New York. My parents shared the house with my grandparents, Antonio and Teresa Sindoni, who lived in the main portion of the house. My grandparents had 10 children. My father, Victor, was the youngest of all the siblings. My mother never had to worry about a babysitter. My grandparents did their absolute best to give us whatever we needed. My brother Robert and I learned what it meant to be proud of our Italian heritage. My grandfather made sure that we understood what it meant to be an American citizen. My grandmother Teresa was a small woman in stature. She stood less than 5 foot tall. She was now in her 70s and surprisingly showed no signs of any gray hair. Her hair was long and she always kept it up. Her skin was very fair and her cheeks would get rosy pink when she had her daily glass of wine with dinner. Grandmother Teresa was born on the Mediterranean coast of Lazio, Italy, in the city of Formia. During the days of the Roman Empire, Formia became a noted seaside resort for the Roman aristocracy. Under Roman citizenship, Formia developed as a political center due mostly to its strategic location on the Via Appia. The ancient city lies approximately 90 miles from Rome. My grandfather Antonio, now in his mid-70s, was suffering from a lung disease due to his cigarette habit. My uncles and aunts would hide his cigarettes, but somehow my grandfather would flip the switch and convince them to give him back his Lucky Strike cigarettes. My grandfather was born in the province of Messina, Sicily. His family was fortunate to survive the devastating earthquake in 1908. Originally named Zankel, a Greek colony founded in the 8th century BC, Messina's population was about 200,000 inhabitants. All of my grandparents' children were born in Italy and would all follow my grandfather to America. His dream was to bring his family to America. My grandfather sought to give all of his children a better life. Papa, as I called him, was a man of honor. He was a good man, decent and sincere. He was opposed to individuals who would cheat, defraud, or use deception to coerce others. My grandfather was a man of integrity. He adhered to ethical and moral principles. My grandfather taught us that it was important to live with honor. He would say sometimes following the honorable course of action, you might have to stand alone to defend your convictions. I was eager to learn more about my grandfather's life. I felt it was now time to ask questions to learn of my ancestry. As I began to ask my grandfather questions about his life, he reached for a cigarette. My grandfather began by saying, "You are like a newspaper reporter." None of my children was so inquisitive. My grandfather now looked directly into my eyes, and I knew that he had an important lesson to share with me. I asked my grandfather what brought him to America. He picked up his Lucky Strike cigarette, took a long drag of it, and blew out a white puff of smoke. He looked at me and paused for what felt like more like an hour. He then began to tell me the story of how he came to America. Papa began the story by telling me about his early life in Messina, Sicily. He spoke of an era before the 1920s when Benito Mussolini established a fascist dictatorship. Papa spoke of his disapproval of the disastrous alliance with Adolf Hitler's Nazi Germany that led to Italy's embarrassing defeat in World War II. My grandfather informed me that Benito Mussolini was not a man of integrity. My grandfather said he could not follow Benito Mussolini blindly like sheep. My grandfather then stated that he used reason and logic to make his decision to leave Italy to pursue the American dream. I can remember listening very closely to each and every word my grandfather had to say. I remember it being only a couple of weeks later that our teacher interrupted our studies with an announcement that President Kennedy had been killed. I recall coming home from school very upset. I was extremely sad. I felt that I had been violated because it was my dream to grow up to become president. I now was feeling afraid. I was now feeling that my future had been taken away from me. When I walked into the living room, my grandfather was watching the television broadcast regarding the JFK assassination. I asked my grandfather why President Kennedy was killed. He picked me up and sat me on his lap as we listened to the television broadcast. As soon as the reporter was done speaking, my grandfather calmly turned to me and answered by saying, "When we examine the evidence, we will know the truth." My grandfather then hugged me and wiped the tears from my eyes.
You know, it's almost funny. Things can't get much worse than now. So I'll keep on trying to sing, but please, just don't ask me to sing right now. Just don't ask me